Thank you. Well, you've had the experience. Now, are you ready for some words? Maybe not. Here's something like that. I always realize how words are often a weaker substitute for the actualization of the divine experience. And as a minister, that's very frustrating because that's all we have. And it's true. And fortunately, we all have minds, and our minds love to chew on thoughts and words and concepts. And actually, all those words can become effective pointers to the same realization. And that's why they have value for us while we're still in a body-mind experience. So, yet one more series we begin today. This is the one, though, we've been waiting for. You ever have that thought? You know, it's the ultimate teaching, the ultimate workshop class. The one final aha that I'll be there. Well, this book actually sort of walks us back from that interpretation, from that tendency to want to think that there's something more that we need to get. And it's based on a book called Emergence. Emergence, 7 Steps for Radical Life Change by Derek Rydall. And, I get a lot of books that come across my desk and people want me to read, and so I have to be discerning, obviously. And this one really says it well, because what it does is it takes this notion that we hold to be true in unity, which is that the Spirit resides within us, that we are made in the image and likeness of the divine. And because that is so, that our work, if you want to call it that, and on the spiritual path, is not so much about gaining something to be brought into us, as it is for us to recognize and to release this imprisoned splendor, this natural, already done knowing of ourselves as we are, as we truly are. Our Buddha nature, our Christ nature, our essential self, our true nature, whatever name you call it. It's already done. It's already done. And so the recipe is not so much about how to make it, but how to make it welcome in our experience. Does that make sense? How can we become more welcoming and become more that which allows us to release what we already are? So today's talk is the radical path home. It's a radical path, but the irony is that there's nowhere to go. We're going to be on a path, but we're not going anywhere. There's no goal to achieve. There's no place you have to go or that you have to be. There's only continuous self-discovery. That's what this is about. It's discovering who we are. And our mission here is to what? To realize and express our divine nature. It isn't to become more divine. It isn't to get God to do something for us so that we're finally perfected in the image and likeness of some pattern of perfection which somehow eludes us. No, we don't believe that. We don't believe that we're a work in progress. We are here to express more of our infinite potential. And have we noticed that sometimes the harder you try to make something happen, the more it slips away? No? Just me then. Okay. Second service won't have that question. get my red pen out here. There is something very paradoxical about effort when it comes to the spiritual path, in that effort has built into it an assumption that we're not there yet, right? So when you say, I'm trying to grow, or I'm trying to get better, or I'm trying to become more spiritual, you are actually belying the truth that says that you already are. So when we try to do this work, this spiritual work, we're actually, it's like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. It's an impossible job. And we're better just to let the stone roll down the hill and realize that we're already standing on the mountaintop. And we just don't know it. We just have become deluded by living our life by the sensory understanding that's so limited that we don't see who we really are. So what is emergence? Well, I'm going to give you, today's talk's going to be a little bit more from the head, a little bit more didactic, so we lay down the foundation for this series. And in future days, I won't be reading as many of my notes, but I think it's important that we have some understanding. So what is emergence? Well, the emergence is a natural unfolding of our divine potential. Okay? A natural unfolding of our divine potential, which is our true, what? Nature or self. Yeah. In organizational development terms, this word is also used, and it defines emergence as an inherent, energy-driven change in evolution toward new levels of organization. Let me read that again. An inherent, energy-driven change in evolution towards new levels of organization. It's a principle, an evolutionary principle that brings the divine pattern within us into greater and greater expression. That's what emergence is. We've heard it said before, we are the hand, we are the heart, and we are the voice of God. So that's this idea of bringing forth this divine potential. How does this absolute come into form? That's what emergence is. And it's a term that's used in other fields to describe how new properties and features take form as we combine the parts that become the creation of something new that could never have been expected from a description of each of those parts. So it's a synergy or a synthesis where we understand that we look at life sometimes with all its little parts. And we try to analyze life, we try to analyze our lives according to its parts. And when we do that, we actually exclude the potential and the possibility of what emergence could be, which is a synthesis of all that we already are coming into form. So emergence is an evolutionary process that naturally occurs when the conditions for growth are there. A synergy that gets created, and you can't predict what's going to happen. What gets created is not necessarily what we expect. So let's get clear about one thing. Emergence is not self-improvement. Can we just all take a deep, can we exhale on that one? Oh my God, how many of us have been trying to improve ourselves our whole life? Like we're just like a home improvement project, right? But just fixing that, and this is broken, and that's not right, and see if I can resurface this and make over that, and it's just endlessly. And this, of course, this is not driven by our divine nature. What's it driven by? By the ego, by the sense of separation from our wholeness, which its full-time job is to try to make us finally be okay, finally be good enough, finally be worthy enough, finally be valuable enough, finally to be acceptable in the eyes of ourselves and other people. It's a nonstop, never-ending, exhausting, seeking but not finding journey. Do we know this one? Could we let it go for now? At least for these weeks that we're doing this service series. Could we do it? Just let it go. We're not going to do that. We want to let go of the belief that there's something in us that's flawed. Yes? And many of us sometimes grew up with spirituality or religion in which our flaws were quite, were highlighted, shall we say, and put in bold letters. And this is not the truth of us. This is not who we are. Everything we need to fulfill us is already within us. Can we say that together? Everything we need to fulfill us is already within us. Now let's make it personal. Everything I need to fulfill me is already within me. Sit with that. Let that sink in. How would it be to know that? How would it be to wake up in the morning and say that to yourself? Not the first thought most of us have, is it? The first thought most of us have is there's something I need, there's something missing. There's some fear arises in us that is something that we have to deal with. But everything we need to fulfill us is already within us. In the same way that an acorn contains all it needs to become what? The oak tree. And we think of this is the metaphor that's used in the book, and obviously it's on the cover here too. And it's an apt metaphor because when you think in terms of something like an acorn and an oak tree, you don't think in terms of that acorn having to go to a lot of workshops, for example, to become the mighty oak. It's like, it doesn't probably have a whole lot of self-doubt about its potential to become what it's encoded to become. It just follows the pattern of its own, what's already encoded in its own DNA. It already knows, it has all of the intelligence and the pattern and everything. It's already there. It's already in the seed. It's probably not the acorn because the acorn is just sort of the covering around the seed. So that this is even smaller, that this tiny little seed would become this great and mighty oak. This great and mighty oak that could withstand all kinds of challenges in life, yes? And stand sturdy and strong and decade upon decade. And it doesn't need to correct some flaws in itself. It just needs the right conditions. And then that seed does what it is encoded to do, which is to become all that it can become. And so it is for us. That placed within us is the seed of the divine. And that we are encoded to become the full expression of these divine beings. That we are coded to have abundant, fulfilling, satisfying, happy lives filled with love, good relationships, abundance, creativity, authenticity. This is all encoded in us. It's not something we have to learn. It's not something we have to grow into. It's not something that is foreign to us, that we have to somehow learn the language of. We just have to let everything that is interfering with that natural growth to be released. So our work is about not gaining anything, but letting go. We'll talk about more of that on the weeks to come. So everything we need to grow, everything we need to fulfill ourselves is already within us. And it just needs the right conditions for it to naturally emerge. And the same thing could be said for a baby, you know. A baby becomes a toddler. And I don't think it's doing any goal setting, for example. I've got to get to 2. I've got to get to 2. All those efforts to fix and achieve and to control get in the way of this emergence. Does anyone know this besides me? Oh, good. This will be a series that you'll all learn something from then. We don't have to control, just like you wouldn't go digging up an acorn after you planted it, would you? And say, how's it doing? How's that growing thing going? Are you sprouting when you're supposed to sprout? There's a lot of dirt on top of you. You're going to make it through all that? No, what do? Don't we just trust? Don't we trust in the life force? We plant seeds in our yard, in our garden, and we just trust that it's going to grow. We don't even know how that happens. I mean, this is the miracle, right? I mean, you plant the seeds and you put it in the good soil and you create all the conditions, but what actually bestows that life to take form? Isn't that beyond us? And isn't that what grace is? And isn't that what's at the core of you and me? That's wanting to just be trusted. That this life that we are can take form in this human embodiment. And it doesn't need a bunch of self-improvement. It already is perfect. I love this poetic description that Derek, the author, gives of how the oak tree can teach us about growth and transformation. He says, "The oak in front of my friend's home is venerable." And that's a good word for a wise old oak, for it has seen much. Its character traced in the knurls, in twists and turns of the trunk, and in its branches that reach out and up so exuberantly. In its life, this centenarian has lived in a way to be admired. From acorn to grandfather tree, it transformed in an amazing, and when you think about it, radical shift from nut to green tree to mature, fully realized oak. It has lived each stage along the way wholly and holy, never resisting the emerging impulse that first cracked its protective shell and forced it to die to its acorn identity. Never shying away from the soil as its roots were driven into the dark so that its branches could rise toward the light. Never fearing the droughts, but instead digging to find its deeper resources. Never fighting the storms, but standing strong when able, or bending instead of breaking, and never judging any stage as better or worse. The oak has things to teach us about emergence. Isn't that beautiful? It's in the book, and we tried to get the books for this week, by the way, and they were not able to ship them. We'll have them this week sometime if you'd like to buy one. So what we create, though, will always be congruent with our self-image. Do we know that here? I think we've probably heard that message before. So if we try to make any improvements, we're still going to be carrying the same underlying fears, the limiting beliefs, the belief that there's something wrong with us. So we're not interested in self-improvement when we just put self-improvement upon a false identity or a false sense of self. And that's why we do have work to do. We do work. We have to embrace the shadow part of us. The shadow part of us is really those limiting beliefs that you and I have grown up with. We have to deal with that. We have to let go of the past, because those past notions have not seen us as a mighty oak, have they? They have confounded the potential that you and I have, and they must be embraced. They must be looked at. I don't know how anybody grows spiritually without dealing with those limiting beliefs. And we do that here. One way we do it here is with the Q process. You may have your own methods of dealing with it. But it is about bringing those limiting beliefs into the light and realize that that's not who you are. That's who you came to believe you are. And the mighty oak will not grow from those false images, those false sense of self. The mighty oak will only grow from the recognition and the realization of your divine nature. And that's why we come to places like this. And that's what these teachings are for. And that's what our classes are for. And that's what counseling is for. And that's what all the good work that you're doing in your life, to erase those, Charles Fillmore would say, those mortal limitations. And to allow that imprisoned splendor of who you are to emerge. And we have to have, lastly I'll say, we have to have faith. We have to have trust. We have to have faith and trust because so much of our growth occurs in the darkness, in the mystery. That acorn sits in the darkness for a time, and would that dark time in the darkness be essential to its emergence? Or no? Yes. So it's not in the darkness going into a deep, dark depression. Oh, this darkness. When am I going to get out of here? It doesn't have that sort of judgment of its own process. It trusts its process. And you and I have to embrace the mystery. You and I have to go through life, and we don't know how things are going to work out. Do you? We don't. But if we trust in the life force, and we trust that the life force is evolving us to a greater and greater expression of itself, then we can be through the times of darkness, which is the times of not knowing. And that's what we're all learning. That if we can embrace the darkness, we can embrace not knowing, because we see the evidence of life in its beauty all around us. We see how the life force knows what it's doing. And it doesn't just know what it's doing in an acorn, in an oak tree. It knows what it's doing in you and in me. And so what we're going to learn over this series is ways that we can create the conditions under which this emergence can take place. That there is something for us to do, but it has nothing to do with fixing ourselves or fixing something that's broken in us. But it's about creating the conditions, and the conditions of mind and heart mostly, that allow this natural emergence, this natural potential of our spiritual beauty and wholeness to emerge. And the way we do that is not making it happen, which is sort of the Western version of going for it, but it's making it welcome. We don't tell the universe what we want. We ask the universe, what does it want to express through us? And then we make that growth and emergence welcome. We become the open, willing, loving channel through which the emergence of the divine self can take place. Does that make sense? So that's the premise for this time we're going to have together, and we'll be learning different ways and different aspects of how this journey can be. And as we emerge from wherever we are in our life right now, to release more of this imprisoned splendor that we are coded to experience and express. Are you with me? Yeah. Can we say no to self-improvement this week? And yes to emergence? Yeah. All right, we're with me. Very good.